Right, welcome back to the International Kindness Festival 2020. Up next, we have Rajiv Lochan, Director, Sundaram Finance. With over 25 years of experience, Rajiv has worked at McKinsey and the Hindu Group before joining Sundaram Finance. Rajiv will be talking about his experiments with truth-telling. Please do send us your question and comments for Rajiv using the question tab. Rajiv, let's go over to you. Rajiv, first question for you. Tell us a little bit about your career in truth-telling. How did it get you to where you are?
First of all, thank you, Suresh, for having me, and thanks to the organizers of the International Kindness Festival for thinking of me and having me join. This is obviously a very exciting event, and I'm thrilled to see the kind of exposure that the audience are getting to a range of speakers as well as subjects, wide-ranging set of topics, and I hope this is a fruitful venture for everybody. And I do hope that this becomes an annual event that we all look forward to participating in every year. My own journey started off actually many years ago at American Express, and one of the sort of blue box values, the 8 of which that exist, one of them was about integrity, to be able to stand up for what you believe in. And many years later, I joined McKinsey, which is a consulting firm. One of the values at McKinsey that we cherished was independence, the ability to speak your mind regardless of what the client's interests or what the circumstance might require you to say otherwise. That was a reinforcement. And subsequently, during my stint at the Hindu, our profession was in the profession of telling the truth, and the truth is the leading sort of value that we cherish in our code of editorial values and code of business ethics. And so as I reflected on my life, when the organizers were kind enough to think of me and ask for a suitable topic, it felt like, as I look back over the last 25 years, American Express is a 170-year-old organization founded in 1850. McKinsey is a 95-year-old organization founded in 1926. And the Hindu is a 142-year-old organization founded in 1878. And so, I just figured that all my life I've worked with organizations that have had long histories, have endured, and one of the common threads amongst all these organizations is with the blue box values at American Express, the core values at McKinsey that we cherished and practiced, and the code of editorial values and business ethics that underpinned what we did at the Hindu. More recently, I've joined Sundaram Finance, where again, it's a relatively younger company, only 66 years old. But one of the underpinnings of the reputation that Sundaram Finance has, again, comes back to our 9 values, which we refer to as the Sundaram way. And I just figured that through my life, I've had, these set of values, institutional values, reinforced over and over. And as I've reflected on the last several years around how important these values are, how one should think about personal values, this notion of genuinely experimenting with truth-telling as an adjective for the broader set of values that one stands for felt like a general topic of interest that might be of value to the audience at the International Kindness Festival. And sort of that's a little bit of my own snapshot on the motivation for why I offered this up as something for us to chat about, Suresh.
All right. Rajiv, tell us, what is your personal relationship with truth? From the time that you were a child, to the time you were a student, to your college education, to your first job, and take us through that journey of your relationship.
Yeah. No, it's been like all of us, we were raised with honesty is the best policy, right? And I'm sure, go back to your school days, go back to my school days. I know my daughter, who's 17 now, grew up listening to that. And I think it's hardwired into our DNA, right from Satyameva Jayate to honesty is the best policy to speak the truth, and so on and so forth. Right? So it's been an important part of life, growing up. But frankly, I don't think I ever realized the relevance of it till I was 22, 23 when I joined American Express. And that's when I really, we had an indoctrination into the blue box values, the importance of living life by the values. And that subsequently got reinforced at McKinsey and at the Hindu as well. So I would say, if I look back at life, it was probably one of awareness, but general lack of application in the early stage of my life. But I'd say, in my 20s and my 30s, I genuinely formed a strong perspective and a set of views on how to think about values in general and truth and honesty in particular. And that's just gotten reinforced and shaped by sort of life experiences I've had. It's not easy, but I think it's a very important value that I cherish.
All right, for those of you in the audience who have questions you'd like to ask Rajiv, I'm going to continue the interview, but please do send us your questions in the question tab. Towards the end of my interview with Rajiv, I'll take your questions with him as well. So Rajiv, you worked with McKinsey. They're the big daddy of consulting, right? And they are a commercial firm, for-profit firm. Does truth-telling serve the company's purposes, their goals towards profit, towards consulting power, towards public profile?
Yeah, no, I think the notion of profit and purpose in general, and profit and honesty in particular, might seem at odds. And surely, I think people that want to make a shortcut route to success may end up being dishonest, untruthful, or peddle falsehoods. But any sort of self-respecting professional and self-respecting organization that has endured or wants to endure, has to be built on a foundation of values. And to my mind, at least, one of the important values to do so is on honesty. At McKinsey in particular, since you asked the question around consulting, the way honesty or truth-telling manifested itself was around the notion of independence. And independence simply meant, regardless of commercial considerations, regardless of hierarchical considerations, regardless of situational considerations, you ought to be independent and speak your mind. Stand up for what you believe in, stand up for what the facts say, and say it like you see it. Of course, you've got to be able to back it up. You've got to be able to say it in a manner that is palatable and not obnoxious, but you've got to say what the truth is. And so, there have been situations in my life where, we've had to deliver very unpleasant messages to board members or management teams, where we saw the facts a certain way and it may not have resonated with their corporate philosophy or corporate strategies, but we had to call it out like we saw it. And the way we did it was very much based on a set of facts that we gathered in a dispassionate manner, affirm that the facts were actually the facts because we sourced it from the clients, confirmed that we had interpreted the facts the right way, and explanation of that interpretation is just delivered quite plainly, and that that's the in some cases the bitter truth, but in most cases the honest truth. Sometimes you like what you see in the mirror, and sometimes you don't. But I think the job of certainly a consultant at McKinsey, and I'd say most professional consultants, is to hold up that mirror in a dispassionate way and let the client see what they see.
And would you hold up the mirror to yourself within the organization?
I think it's required by almost by definition, right? As I look back at my time at the Hindu, our purpose was to inform and shape public opinion, and so the whole profession is based on gathering facts, verifying facts, and laying it out without any editorialization in the form of news to inform people and shape public opinion. And there is no, and there are many tensions that come along, right? There might be facts we gather about a prominent advertiser who might underpin the commercial considerations of the organization. But once truth telling is the primary value that you get behind, then you just got to hold the mirror up, certainly to whoever we need to hold it up, but certainly internally as well. So there have been numerous instances where our editorial colleagues have held the mirror up internally to say, look, this is what we're finding by way of facts from an advertiser, and we just have to say it like we see it. There might be commercial implications, but guess what? We privilege truth over commercial considerations, and so there have been numerous instances of holding the mirror up internally.
Right. So Rajiv, you're saying honesty is the best policy, but is it good company policy?
No doubt. Again, a terrific question. To my mind, at least, there's no doubt. There are obviously values that will come in conflict. And I think we're moving in an era where we are faced more and more with right versus right dilemmas. I think for a while in the country, as I look back, we've had to deal with right versus wrong temptations, where you either had to pay a bribe or work a back channel to get to curry favor, or you might have fudged your expense report and that was okay. And all those are examples of right versus wrong temptations that we've had to deal with. But given where the country is and where it is going, I feel increasingly we're going to be faced with right versus right dilemmas. And for that, I think it's critical to have clarity on what your underlying institutional values are, and as a consequence, what your personal values for the employees ought to be. And so every organization will form its set of values by which they'd like to live. And at Sundaram Finance, for example, honesty is explicitly a value that we've stated amongst the 9 that we have. There are other organizations that wouldn't put it quite so explicitly, but would have, contextualizing to their specific circumstance, a variant on honesty. Like I mentioned with McKinsey, it might be independence. In the case of American Express, it was integrity, and there might be other variants on it. But if you have to deal with these right versus right dilemmas that increasingly our employees will face, we will run into situations where we have to deal with, for example, justice on the one hand versus mercy on the other. And let me tell you what I mean by that by unpacking it a little bit, right? Imagine you've had an employee that's been with you for 15, 20, 25 years, right? A loyal employee that's contributed to the organization's growth and welfare. And let's imagine the employee gets caught with their hand in the jar, right? And how do you make this? Is from a justice standpoint, this individual has done something that is unconscionable, and therefore you ought to take action. But from a mercy standpoint, they've actually been with you for a long time, contributed to the organization's welfare. So which way do you go? A variant on this might be truth versus loyalty, right? Or honesty versus loyalty. There are some organizations that privilege loyalty far more than they privilege honesty. And depending on the context of the organization, they take the call which way to go. In my experience over the last 25 years, and certainly colored by the experiences that I have had, the institutions that I've been exposed to, and the reflection and sort of introspection that I have done, truth and honesty are foundational, non-negotiable values that every institution, certainly in India, should build itself on. Particularly given the path that we've come through over the last 70 years, which has been a fairly mixed bag from a political standpoint, from an economic ideology standpoint, to what we've done over the last 2 to 3 decades, where we've embraced a very different, at least economic ideology. And therefore we are maturing both as a democracy and as an economy. And given where we are, I certainly see the need for honesty, the need for truth telling to be a foundational value for virtually all organizations.
So as a leader of an organization, you have 2 commitments. One is a fiduciary responsibility to keep your company profitable. You might, in the case of the Hindu, it's not a listed company, so you don't have shareholders. But you might have shareholders, you might have stakeholders, you might have financial investors. On one hand, you have responsibilities. On the other side, you have a moral duty, but not a responsibility, to be honest. When these 2 things come into conflict, what if you could be 10 times more profitable by telling a small lie, not a very big lie, just a small lie? Would your fiduciary responsibility overtake your moral obligation?
These are questions that we all grapple with on a regular basis, right? And increasingly the stakes are going up for all of us as a country, right? At Sundaram Finance, for example, we are in the business of giving money out to underserved entrepreneurs, primarily sort of small road transport operators, but also entrepreneurs in small and medium enterprises that may not have easy access to financial services. And sure, if we can cut a few corners and if we can toe the line a little bit differently, we could end up making more profits. We could grow faster and therefore keep our shareholders happy. But we have another important stakeholder, which is our employees. And one's got to certainly ensure that all the stakeholders are well balanced in their representation, right? And so if there is a temptation to, again, please one stakeholder to the detriment of the other, certainly, the scenario that you said of a 10x increase in profits, over a what might be seen as a small stepping over the line, one could evaluate and consider. But if you look at the different multiple stakeholders that one is responsible for, it's critical for our employees, for example, to sleep well at night. And this is something that we reinforce, and this has been a consistent strain through my entire career, right? It's not just profits, it's also purpose, it's also taking care of communities that we live in and being good citizens. So there are multiple responsibilities that we as professionals have, and certainly institutions have, that go beyond simply profits. I think we also have a general hangover, if I can call it that, of the last few decades that we as a country have evolved, where it feels like profits and morality or ethics or doing things the right way are seen as being at odds. And certainly in my experience, I think being purposeful and being profitable are actually self-reinforcing. By actually being true to your values that you stand for, true to the purpose that you want to deliver, profits actually follow. At this stage, I'm tempted to recall my grandfather, who was a relatively middle class public administrator in Chengalpet district here in Tamil Nadu, and he growing up told me something which has stuck with me. He said, Lakshmi and Saraswati are both important. But recognize that when you chase Lakshmi, she tends to be fickle and runs away. So he says, chase Saraswati. And I asked, why Tata? Why does that make any sense? And he says, listen, Saraswati is actually quite generous. You chase her, she'll actually give her graces to you. But remember that Lakshmi is actually jealous of Saraswati. So you get the good graces of Saraswati and Lakshmi will follow. So, as I think about that, I was reminded by a question on, 10x profits versus towing the line. I'd rather sort of forget the 10x profits and stick to my values and know that Lakshmi will find me because I've remained true to the cause, the purpose, the set of values that I've chosen to abide by. And sure enough, in some cases, those profits might slip away and we might have, a quarter that is perhaps not as good as it could have been. But we are in it for the long haul, and so at least my instinct is to always chase Saraswati, knowing fully well that Lakshmi is jealous of Saraswati and will follow.
Let's talk about the trust deficit in the world. Multiple polls have taken. I'm sure if you poll this audience, trust in the media, trust in politicians, and trust in business is at an all-time low. Why do you think this is true across the world?
Well, I think first, I don't think we knew that what it was in the past. And so it feels pronounced a lot more now, simply because we don't have a baseline. They say ignorance is bliss. And maybe 15 years ago or 20 years ago, there wasn't as much discourse, or there wasn't as much information availability. And therefore, we just didn't know what we didn't know. Now, just given the proliferation of media, proliferation of social media in particular, and what technology and the digital world have done to us, including the mobile technology, all of us now are, journalists. All of us now are doctors. All of us are now, firefighters. We just seem to know everything about everything, right? And so I think the information glut that we have right now feels like we just know a hell of a lot. In addition, what has happened is, I think social media in particular has polarized views quite significantly. Without necessarily people applying their minds and understanding what ideological position or positions that they would lean towards, right? So we just because I have a certain flavor in what I'm tweeting, for example, or a certain nuance that I'm posting on Instagram, or something I'm saying on LinkedIn, a bunch of people would peg me as a bhakt, or they peg me as a liptard, right? And what that immediately does is it puts us in a very binary position, even without us necessarily stating what our preferences or views might be, but simply based on what people are inferring. That kind of polarization, I think, is deeply unhealthy, especially if it is not well formed on introspection, reflection, and a perspective that supports an ideological position on a range of topics. So it's very easy, to get pegged, and I think that manifests itself in a little bit of a trust deficit. To my way of thinking, I think enduring organizations have endured, right? They've seen the ups and the downs, and they've adapted, they've changed. At different points, that have had a trust deficit or a trust surplus, as the case might be. So partly, I guess what I'm arguing is the perceived trust deficit now, whether it's on corporates, whether it's on in the media or with the government is a little bit like a complex number. There is a real part and then there is an imaginary part. At least my case is that the imaginary part has been somewhat blown out of proportion, just given how much information is available. Sure, there is some merit and some truth in that trust deficit, and we all have to work to ensure that that gets bridged. But I feel the super glut of information tends to hide what the actual trust deficit, and the fact that we don't have a baseline has just made it look much bigger than it actually is.
And as being a newsman, you would know bad news sells much better than good news. So, if you have one item of bad news, that tends to travel all around the world, and good news tends to remain quiet.
Yeah, we privilege sensationalism over sense. That's for sure.
Rajiv, there is a Sanskrit saying that says, Satyam bruyat priyam bruyat, na bruyat apriyam satyam. Speak the truth and speak that which is beautiful, but don't speak the unbeautiful truth. Right? Do you believe in that? Sometimes it's small truths or dishonesties or withholding the truth might actually be a better service than telling the naked, ugly truth.
Depending on the context and the situation, perhaps it's actually a terrific question that you've raised. I can't say I've given it too much thought, but just instinctively, I feel there may be situations and circumstances where not speaking the truth, which is quite different than actually speaking a falsehood, may actually be appropriate. I would still err on the side of speaking the truth, but should the situation warrant it, not speaking it and keeping mum would be preferred and certainly more important than an unacceptable path, which is to speak a falsehood.
As a corporate leader, I'm certain you get a fair number of resumes that cross your table. I can tell you for sure, my resume is full of white lies, and I'm assuming 99% of all resumes are full of white lies. For the youngsters in this audience who may be graduating from college and applying for their first job, what's a good way to tell the truth in your resume and yet get the job?
I think authenticity is most important. You'll get caught very quickly. I don't think getting an interview is the objective of putting a resume together. Getting the job is the objective. Mm-hmm. And so characterize yourself as accurately as possible and as exhaustively as possible based on what you've done and sincerely done. That would be, I think, most important. Because again, what matters is not getting the interview. You can go to 100 interviews and never land a job. And you can have a terrific resume, but I think people are seasoned enough to quickly figure out where you're telling the truth and where you're crossing the line. I think the notion of the white lie is also quite interesting. Right? It's a different form of not telling the truth, I suppose. You're not blatantly lying, but you're sort of sugarcoating what or slightly exaggerating what you might have done. My strong suggestion to particularly the young folk now is to avoid that, simply because this is a slippery slope, right? You may get away with it once, you may get away with it twice, but you could never ever do this forever, right? And there are numerous examples of, extremely wise, smart individuals who thought that they were getting away with it, but the truth always catches up with you, right? And it might happen at the age of 60, and you might say, listen, I pulled the buck till I was 60, but guess what? That's not how you want to end your life, right? In a ignominious and terrible way. You want to live a full life and have joyous memories and people that you love and care about around you. So I'd say it's not worth telling that white lie. I'd rather you stick to the truth. There's plenty of opportunity and enough opportunity for all of us. It may take a little bit of time, but that perseverance and patience, I think, is far more important than getting on the tiger of white lying or distorting the truth a little bit, because you'll never be able to get off the tiger, and when you do, the tiger will eat you.
All right, final question to you, Rajiv Lochan. Let's talk about advertising. Advertising is full of pretty lies. It says that this soap washes whitest. We don't know whitest according to whom, or this perfume makes you irresistible to women. These are pretty lies. The people who are lying know that they're lying. The people who are buying know that they're lying. What's wrong with this world? You know you're lying, I know you're lying, but we're both happy with this arrangement.
Yeah. It's a tough one. This is a tough one. I think there's both a lot of very talented professionals and also a hell of a lot of money that goes behind it. to say nothing of a range of celebrities that tend to endorse it and put their, sort of reputations on the line to peddle a product, so to speak. So it is a tough one. I think it's important for the medium that is carrying the advertisement to ensure where the line gets drawn on facts that are verifiable versus facts that are made up. So, for example, going back to my experience at the Hindu, when people said this is the whitest, or we are number one, or this is the best XYZ product, we would always require a set of facts to back that up. If not, we would not carry that part of it. And this was just part of our way of sticking to our editorial and business values and ensuring that we were actually telling the truth as best as we could. So, for example, people would distort the flag to appeal to the patriotic emotions of people to advertise a product. And if you go back and look at the Flag Act, it's not allowed to use the national flag or any emblem in an advertising platform, and we've declined business. So it is customers know that there is a certain amount of exaggeration, perhaps even a certain amount of falsehood. Surely, a celebrity that endorses a product doesn't necessarily use it. And there is obviously a very important commercial consideration, but seeing someone that you relate to, seeing an outcome that you like, sort of satisfies an itch that you want to scratch, right? And so we do that and we participate. Stakes are quite high, but I would place the responsibility on two parties, right? The creative agencies that created to ensure that they are not stepping over the line. Then there's the Advertising Standards Council of India that ensures that everybody is playing by the rules. And second is the medium that is projecting the advertisement and providing the platform. It could be a newspaper, it could be a television channel, it could be a radio channel, or it could indeed be a digital portal or application that's carrying it. I think they do certainly carry the responsibility of ensuring that what is being peddled at least adheres to some basic tenets of honesty and truth.
All right, Rajiv Lochan of Sundaram Finance, thank you for taking time out to be on the International Kindness Festival 2021. And from what we hear, you're the managing director designate. So when do you take over your new role?
I take over on April the 1st, in a few weeks' time.
April the 1st. Let's hope that's a real date. Well, we wish you all the best for your new role as managing director, and we hope that you continue on your journey of truth telling in your corporate world.
Thank you, Suresh. Thanks for the opportunity. My very best wishes to all the folks and the participants. Enjoy the festival. And like I said, I hope this becomes an annual event.
Thank you very much, Rajiv.